Saludos, it's your host, Gabe Morales, returning back for part two on Colorado gangs. My friend Mark Martinez worked as a United States probation officer from 1978 to the year 2000 and remembers the influx of gang members moving into the Denver area from California in the early 1990s. A number of gang members he interviewed moved from California to Colorado as they faced legal difficulties. Many were given the option by sentencing judges in California to leave the state or go to prison. So they chose Denver, a city they felt was ripe for gang infiltration. The advent of federal sentencing guidelines changed the scope of offenders entering the federal system in Colorado as well. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Colorado began prosecuting a significant number of drug defendants beginning in 1988 when sentencing guidelines took effect. These sentencing guidelines provided for significant prison sentences, especially for those involved in the distribution of crack cocaine. Based on the prosecution of a significant number of gang members, federal probation officers needed to change the scope of their field of supervision as their caseloads grew. So the great California gang migration during the late 1980s to early 90s, as I discussed on several other videos, influenced Colorado, as well as many other states, of prison gangs and other criminal organizations. While in theory, La M has no rank, it is interesting to me that the number one Mexican mafia member in the federal BOP was considered to be Adolf Champ Reynoso, who was originally from Denver. That's a fact that very little people know about. He and his family moved to East LA to the Ramona Gardens housing project, also referred to as Hazard, but Champ maintained connections to Colorado all through his life. It was rumored that Champ sanctioned Anthony Chappie Chaparro, who was an inmate doing time in the Colorado DOC system. Chaparro entered Colorado DOC in 1981. Colorado DOC also housed Michael Spider Roybal, who was Champ's stepbrother. And the Colorado system also housed Paul Psycho Rodriguez Sanchez, who was an inmate associate, and many others. Around 1989, the MA started having a big influence at the Arkansas Valley Correctional Facility. Inmates housed there created a 10-year plan to build up Sureños and to weed out any weak links. Once Sureños were successful in doing that, they went to war with the gangster killing Incas in 2001. The Sureños stabbed a GKI member named Calderon. In retaliation, GKIs jumped the Sureños in one of the prison chow halls. By September 16, 2001, which is Mexican Independence Day, the Sureños and GKIs reached an uneasy truce. Once that occurred, in 2002, the Sureños took on most Black inmates in the system. Then from 2004 to 2005, they took on any Norteños that were out on the yards in Colorado DOC facilities. This is when politics in Colorado prisons and jails got a lot more sophisticated. At one time in Colorado, the old-time convicts ran the yards. In the old convict system, power is based on seniority and respect earned in the system. And beats were usually on a personal basis or according to race and not by gang affiliation. That has changed in the last decades. There was also Raymond Cornbread Baca, who was from the Pueblo area and famous for committing bank robberies and doing murders in and out of prison. Steve Lucero told me that back in the day at the Corrections Academy, staff would always talk about Baca. People feared him. It was said that when he walked the yard, it was like the parting of the Red Seas. Baca was a small man, but very serious about respect, and he made examples out of people who disrespected him. According to Cornbread, he got that name after doing his first stint in a prison which is now called the Old Max, the Colorado Territorial Prison, which was built in Canyon City in 1871 and became a state prison in 1876 after Colorado gained admittance to the Union. In those days, music was piped into the cell blocks to calm the convicts, like which has been seen in a very famous movie. A song called Cornbread came on, which was played by a jazz musician named Earl Bostic. Baca began to dance and enjoy the music so much that afterwards the convicts started calling him Cornbread, and it stuck. Guys like Cornbread operated by the convict code mentality, and that was never be a coward and never snitch to the cops. Corrections officers in jails and prisons are often called jail cops or prison cops by the convicts. One of the first to make this difference was Anthony Chappie Chaparro, and he fell off the streets and was incarcerated in Colorado DOC in the early 1980s on a robbery case. As I said, Chappie had ties to Califas via Champ, but he didn't exploit them in his early days. When Chaparro entered the system, no one detected a mano negro, black hand, tattooed on him too much later in 2003. As I said, Champ Reynoso also had another relative, Spider Roybal, who organized with some of the Sureños on the yards, more like the Mexican Mafia controlled Califas. In an interview by then Security Threat Group Manager Daryl Vigil, now retired, it was revealed that there was a long-time plan to take over the Colorado system. There was another individual named Pedro Chino del Villar Barrios, who was involved in major disturbances at Corcoran Prison, which at the time was probably considered the number 2 joint after Pelican Bay. In 2002, it was discovered that Rodriguez penned a letter to the newly formed Aryan Syndicate in Colorado, explaining an alliance that the Sureños and Mexican Mafia associates would have with whites in the system. This was very similar to what the Mexican Mafia and Aryan Brotherhood had, a shaky but respected truce. A truce was also made with the gangster Knights Insane, shot caller Jimmy Valenzuela. And as I stated, with the GKIs out of the way, the Sureños and Mexican Mafia associates could move on black inmates. Bloods were attacked at the Limon Correctional Facility, located on the west side of the state. At the Buena Vista Correctional Facility, the Black Gangster Disciples were hit with the help of the 211 crew, which is a homegrown white prison gang in Colorado. And at the Arkansas Valley Correctional Facility, the Crips were set to be hit. Steve Lucero was an investigator at the time and was able to prevent many of these incidents from happening. Paul Portillo Jr. represented El Monte Flores and was Chappie's right-hand man. Paul's father was Paul Güero Tres Portillo, a validated Mexican Mafia member. Güero Tres had connections to Colorado Springs, as well as Maui, Hawaii, a fact that very few individuals know. There was a Hawaii California Mexican Mafia faction that was pretty strong at one time. Another individual, Edmundo Cyclone Hernandez from Latin Times in Califa, stepped up. Cyclone was a tax collector for Danny Trujillo, who was a big-time dope dealer in California. Former Mexican Mafia heavyweight Rene Box Enriquez knew of Trujillo, and is also rumored that Rene took some merchandise from him. Rene, if you're listening to this, maybe you can verify that. I was told that Rene took a good amount of cash and a car from Trujillo because he didn't pay his taxes. Unfortunately for Hernandez, he caught a murder case in Colorado. As far as Chappie, he was already facing some criticism from Sureños for interacting with the Estrellas, the Norteños. And local Sureños also found out that he was lying about some things, and Chap was no longer a factor in Colorado DOC after that. Chap eventually died of cancer, but what he started is still going on today. There was a green light put on all black gangs by the Sureños. Jason Capone Sanchez was also from California and involved in these politics. During this time, there were rumors that Juan China Boy Arias from a gang called Arta in Califas was running Colorado from the federal BOP. Arta is the same gang that Rene Box Enriquez was from, as well as another MA heavyweight, Raymond Güero Shyrock, that I've spoken about on several episodes previously. China Boy was finally transferred out of the ADX in Florence, Colorado, to USP Lewisburg, where he met his demise in 2008 when he was killed by an MA prospect named Jose Saco Caldera. Word was that China Boy was going to hit his cellie, Psycho, but Psycho caught the Huila and killed China Boy first. Champ Reynoso sat on the MA Federal Council at the ADX with 2 other heavy hitters from the Mexican Mafia, William Anselm Willie Bobo Giovea, who was from Redondo Beach, as well as Philip Blackie Segura, who was from Clover. And all 3 were considered the top dogs in the BOP, but they had other Mexican Mafia members working for them and supporting this system. Giovea was released from the BOP on December 14, 2018, and Blackie Segura was released from the BOP on September 24, 2020. All were given a lot of respect because of their seniority in the federal system for taking care of business and keeping the MA money-making machine working over the years. I will likely do an episode on all 3 of these individuals, as well as other Mexican Mafia shot callers. But for now, you can catch some of this information in our previous Mexican Mafia videos. It should also be noted here that after the federal government went after the Nuestra Familia in Operation Black Widow around the year 2000, many Nuestra Familia prison gang members were sentenced after that RICO trial and sent to the ADX. There were also several Nuestra Familia associates that were sent there and to other prisons in the federal BOP, who were previously known as Northern Structure, or Nuestra Raza, and post-Operation Black Widow, Norteños Soldados, or INSOLs. But all of these groups have since been abolished by the federal NF leadership. So now I understand it's just West Familia Carnales or supporters who are getting groomed for NF membership. In addition, the federal faction of the NF seems to have gained power over the California state faction, who had their top leadership charged in RICO cases, and likely saw the handwriting on the wall that they would be greatly outnumbered since the federal faction had a jump of by organizing for over 20 years in the federal BOP, and even before that, via Mad Dog Cervantes. A local prison gang that many people outside of Colorado are not familiar with is Los Primer Padres. According to informants, Los Primer Padres started at the Arkansas Valley Correctional Facility in Colorado DOC. They initially told staff that they were just a cultural group who had gang members from different barrios, but Colorado DOC soon classified them as a prison gang or security threat group. They adopted a similar convict code as the Mexican Mafia, but did not want to get in trouble with the MA by using any of their symbols. They will use the San Diego Padres logo to represent, and some members claim to have relatives that are Sureños in San Diego. But that is pretty much where the Mexican Mafia Sureño connections end. Los Primer Padres, or LPP, have their own bylaws and address each other as carnal. Some of the rules state, no matter what, right or wrong, always be there for your carnals. They also have another rule that states death before dishonor, so they're considered a blood in, blood out prison gang. In 1989, at the Arkansas Valley Correctional Facility on the North Yard, in a walk around the track, is where the LPP is said to have originated, according to Manuel Gamboa, who was its founder. It was initially started to bring all the raza on the yard together. The name Los Primer Padres means the first fathers, and they noted Chicano and Hispano's long tradition in the state, as noted in part 1, as being some of the first fathers in the state. Gamboa said they'll also be the last fathers. Besides Gamboa, other LPP originals were Darren Romero, Angelo Diaz, Eric Davis, Andrew Salas, and a guy named O'Brien. Richard Turbo Herrera came in later, as did Skinny Vinny Rodriguez. Gamboa wanted to make the LPP an organization that united all Colorado street gangs. Gamboa didn't believe in gangbanging against your own raza on the streets, but thought it was even more important to unite while in prison. As the group evolved, they also used 12-16-16 for the letters LPP. By 1997, information was gathered that the LPP was organizing out on the street, and they started using gang connection and other connections like the Latin Dreams Bike and Car Club, whose president was Richard Turbo Herrera, a validated LPP member. The LPP patch was made in a hobby shop at the Limon Correctional Facility, located in Lincoln County, Colorado. And in 2013, multiple members and associates of the LPP were busted in Adams County, Colorado. From their beginning origins until now, prison gangs have become more and more violent, more organized, and more populated in the Colorado system. An example of this was the Crawley, Colorado riot, which took place on July 22nd, 2005. And that will be explained more in a video on Wyoming, Utah, and Nevada gangs. During this riot, Colorado, Wyoming, and Washington state inmates were involved. As I stated earlier, many gang members have experienced severe trauma in their early lives. According to trauma and substance abuse expert Marlene Rodriguez Schaefer, individuals with histories of sexual assault, domestic violence, child abuse, and neglect, and witnessing interpersonal violence from their childhood onward make up most clients served by public mental health and substance abuse service systems. The greater the trauma, the greater the risk for alcoholism and alcohol abuse and drug abuse and associated violence problems. There are many good violence prevention and intervention programs in the Southwest United States. One person I know who worked very hard to keep violence down amongst youth was Reverend Leon Kelly, who served as executive director of the Open Door Youth Gang Alternatives Program, which was the oldest ongoing anti-gang program within the state, having been founded in 1986. Reverend Kelly's experience, dedication, and personal faith made him an agent of change in many young people's lives over the years. Reverend Kelly established a program called Flipping the Script that worked with adult ex-gang members who are on parole and were trying to change their lives around. The Gang Reduction Initiative Denver, or GRID, is a comprehensive plan for reducing gang violence. It works with police who are involved in suppression, and the GRID program is involved in intervention and prevention strategies. The GRID program targeted active gang members with intervention strategies, as well as trying to reach youth at risk for prevention of gang involvement. There's also GRASP, Gang Rescue and Support Project, which is a peer-run intervention program out of Denver, Colorado. It utilizes a philosophy of La Cultura Cura, culture cures, as a way of self-healing of individuals by encouraging them to examine their roots. This program was led by Francisco Ciso Gallardo before he moved to California in 2020 to work with the National Compadres Network. But the program that Gallardo built is still in existence today, as he helped guide and train many of his peers who are tired of seeing so many dead homeboys in their hoods and decided to do something about it. Another individual involved in the GRASP program is Michelle McDaniel, whose experiences as a former runaway and female gang member allowed her to educate, empower, and encourage youth, especially females, to make better choices. She has also worked as an at-risk intervention mentor, or AIM, community outreach worker. She is very aware of how females get involved in the gang lifestyle, either as associates or very active members, and knows that very often they have been victimized. Steve and I asked both Cisco and Michelle to speak at a conference we put on at the community college in Pueblo, Colorado. Michelle also appears in one of our videos discussing female gangs, and I hope to get Cisco on to be interviewed in a future episode. Let me be clear here again. Most Latinos are not criminals, and not all Chicano youth join gangs. In fact, the vast majority do not. But hopefully this video has helped educate you a little bit more about what to look for if you're a parent or a counselor. I also hope that it helps some youth seek help if you are gang involved, or that it helps steer youngsters away from the gang lifestyle in the first place, and that you live a very productive and healthy life and help, not hurt your communities. We have today Mark Salazar. He is with Hard Knocks Gang Prevention and Intervention.
One thing a lot of us fail to remember is that when we do hard time, our families do harder time because they're doing time right along with us, and like you said, what was appealing about the gang lifestyle and whatnot, through the music, through the videos, and through movies and so on and so forth. But they don't glamorize the non-contact visits from behind a glass. You touching the glass, trying to, touch your family, but you're behind a glass. They don't glamorize the non-contact visits. They don't glamorize the psychological and emotional pain that one deals with the loss of a loved one while you're incarcerated. They don't glamorize things of that nature simply because it doesn't sell. It's just something that, like I said, a lot of these youngsters, they're growing up in broken homes, and those are the ones that are referred to me to work with, because our agency, we were given a ATP status. We were recognized in the 1st of April of this year. We were granted as an approved treatment provider for the state of Colorado, and so we actually have been in discussions with juvenile parole already, and also they have a new warden at YOS, at the Youth Offender Services, and so I'm in the middle of talking with them to go facilitate groups in there, because I have myself an evidence-based curriculum that I utilize, and because when I went back to school, not only did I get my degree, and I fell probably 29 credits shy of my bachelor's, starting up my own nonprofit, but I also got my certification as an addiction counselor, because we all know drugs and alcohol go hand in hand with gangs.
You can find more information on prevention, intervention, and suppression of gangs in Colorado and other Southwest states in a book that Steve Lucero and I wrote called Chicano Gangs and History of the Southwest U.S., From Canalismo to Chaos. Before we end, I'd like to give a final shout out to my most esteemed friends from Colorado and all the hardworking cops there who do their best to keep the streets safe. Salud. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I look forward to bringing you more information on gangs in other states and cities. Until next time, this is Gabe Morales signing off for Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians.